Have you ever had those thoughts that you're a bad person, and you persistently have those thoughts that I'm a bad person, I'm unworthy, I'm incapable of being loved, I'm stupid? Whatever thoughts that you have that are negative, that you internalize and identify with, this is all linked to low self-esteem, which is rooted in shame. When you feel shameful, you feel there is a part of yourself or who you are who is not deserving, who doesn't meet up to the standard, who is lower than other people. And shame is rooted often in our earlier experiences of life, where we learn how other people perceive us, and we therefore internalize it as a way to make sense of these emotions that we experience. Well, in this video, I want to get down to what shame really is, why we internalize those feelings, and more importantly, how you can navigate your way out of shame to manage it for good. I'm Desh. I'm a counsellor who has supported countless clients in their own self-awareness journey, and I want to talk about shame. Shame has many roots, and it can be triggered by different things. We may be shameful when we make a mistake on something. We may be, feeling shame when we forget to do something for someone else. Maybe we feel shame because we've told a lie, and now we're going to label ourselves as a liar. So shame and guilt are kind of linked together, but they're separate. So guilt is when you say, I feel guilty because I've done a bad thing. Shame is, I feel shameful because I'm a bad person. So you are completely identifying with the negative emotion, and this is what causes and contributes to shame. So if you're watching this and you feel those feelings of shame, you feel ashamed of who you are, maybe because you see yourself as a bad person, that you're incapable, that you're not worthy of being loved, that you see yourself as that person, that's just who I am. What actions do you do in your life that support that statement or that feeling? What do you do on a regular basis that confirms that that's who you are? Now, this is an important question to ask yourself, because this is going to help you separate out what is factually true versus what's the narrative in your head telling you. And if this is all just a story in your head, where's that story coming from? And if I may, I want to invite you with me now to journey to the past. Go back to your childhood. Think about how many times you've heard those statements that you're telling yourself now. So let's say you say, I'm a failure. I am a failure. This is why I make so many mistakes, because I am a failure. I'm not capable of learning. I can guarantee you that you've heard that statement or similar statements when you were younger. When we grow up, when we make mistakes, we are at the mercy of the people in our environment to help regulate us. And of course, as human beings, we have physical needs, but we also have emotional needs. Both need to be met in order for us to live a life that's optimal to us. For most of us, we have physical needs met, but not many of us have emotional needs met, where someone can help us regulate our emotions and show us how to do it. So when we make a mistake and a parent might say to us, you're so stupid, how could you make that mistake? You're so dumb. We hear these statements. As a child, it's difficult for us to separate one incidence of a mistake versus you being that person who makes mistakes all the time, and you therefore being stupid or dumb, as they said. And when you hear that message long enough, you start to internalize it, because as a child, we don't really have that understanding of taking an action now versus who you are. As an adult, you can understand, I can do good things and I can do bad things, but neither mean I'm a good or bad person. As a child, it's different. The way we make sense of the world is to internalize it. So if our parents get divorced, the child will typically blame themselves. It's my fault this happened. Because when a significant change happens, the child usually blames themselves as the reason, because this is how they're making sense of the situation. So when a parent or whoever is telling that child, you're stupid, you're always making mistakes, you're dumb, when they're hearing this frequently, they start to believe it. This must be true. What they're telling me must be true because I'm making mistakes. Why am I making mistakes? Because I'm dumb. That's the easiest way to kind of process it. So having that experience and going into adulthood, you have this narrative set in your mind that you are not capable, you're a failure. Therefore, you're setting yourself up to fail in the future because you've already convinced yourself that this is who you are. Instead of saying, I've made mistakes in previous times, how can I learn and grow from these mistakes? It doesn't mean I'm a failure. It means I failed, but it's not I'm a failure. I failed in these endeavors, but I know I can grow from them and learn from them. But if you say to yourself you're a failure, because you're a failure, you can't grow from them or learn from them, so you won't try. So it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy, and this is why the words we hear and what we tell ourselves is absolutely crucial. And I'm not really a big believer in just kind of doing positive affirmations in your head. I don't believe they're effective. They can be effective for some people, but I don't think they work. Just to tell yourself, I'm not a failure, I'm not a failure. But what is more effective is you catching the fact that you're telling yourself you are one. So it's not necessarily replacing it with the opposite statement, but just catching yourself when you say you are one, and just to understand where is this coming from. So this is what I want to encourage you to do, is to build the self-awareness and the relationship you have with your thoughts now. Because a lot of the thoughts that you're having, such as I'm a failure, or I'm a bad person, or I forgot to, pick up the groceries or pick up medicine for my grandma, now I'm labelled as being ungrateful or uncaring. And with the thoughts and feelings you have of shame, because they've been repeated for so many years, they become habitual. They become automatic. We don't even think of it. We just feel it. Maybe you lied on one occasion and you were branded a liar. So these instances are what feed shame within us. And shame is essentially when we've internalized these comments and have identified with it. We have assigned our own sense of self and who we are with these statements and with the feeling. So when you're feeling quite low about yourself, it makes complete sense to say that I'm inadequate or I'm unworthy. The reason we say that to ourselves is because then the feeling makes sense. It has its place. So we're almost adjusting our sense of self around the feeling rather than questioning the feeling. This is the starting point of developing self-awareness. You need to have a kind of visual map of the thoughts that you have and the feelings that you have that are linked to shame, or you feeling ashamed about yourself. And instead of compromising your own sense of identity around these feelings, what you want to do is question the feelings in the first place. Why am I feeling this emotion? Why am I feeling ashamed of who I am? Why do I feel I'm telling myself I'm a failure? Why am I telling myself I'm a bad person? And I'm feeling ashamed as a result of this. Why do I have these thoughts in the first place? So you need to take that journey back to understand who said this before. At what point did you internalize these comments for yourself? It could be at home, it could be at school, it could be at work. When we are judged by others, it's very easy for us to internalize those judgments and say it as a matter of fact and see it as a statement of truth, rather than question those statements in the first place, especially if we hear it time and time again. In a weird way, shame is kind of like a form of gaslighting. At some point, you've gaslighted yourself into believing you are a bad person or inadequate, just because you've heard those statements from other people potentially in the past. And the way you make sense of hearing these statements constantly is just to say, well, I must be a bad person then. I keep hearing this all the time. It's just easier to accept the defeat, rather than putting boundaries to say, I know what my worth is. I know what I'm worth. These statements are not true. This is a reflection of what this person's saying, not me. So why am I compromising my own sense of identity? So if you are feeling ashamed about who you are, then there's a few things you can do to address it. So the first step is always to question where these feelings and thoughts are coming from and why they exist and how they're serving you and what purpose they're trying to serve. What are they trying to communicate? You've got to question it. So instead of bending your own sense of identity to accommodate these feelings and thoughts, you should be firm in your conviction of who you are. And in order to do that, we need to understand what success is and where value and worthiness come from. Because a lot of us attribute success and being worthy with the external, with accomplishing certain things, with the status we have in society, with what jobs we hold, with what clothes we wear. There's so many things on the external that we value and that we admire and that we attach our sense of worth to. But what about your inherent internal sense of worth, which is where it truly lies? Why is that not being given the intention it deserves? Why is it always being compromised depending on what other people say or what's going on in your environment? Why do you bend your own sense of self based upon the comments of other people? which is probably reflective of their own inadequacy and their own defense mechanisms, not yours. Yet you've internalized it, you've accepted it on a subconscious level that this is who I am. So understanding your own inherent worth is crucial to provide the skeleton for what is going to become your self-esteem in the future. You need to understand and recognize your own sense of worth. So do that by journaling, by writing down what it is about yourself you like. What values do you hold that you admire? What do other people like about you? Once you have that baseline understanding of your own sense of worth, the next step is to set boundaries that align to that sense of worth. And you can watch my last video where I speak about being your authentic self. In order to be authentic and in order to navigate shame, you need to allow yourself to be vulnerable. By being vulnerable, I mean being more open to how you truly feel. If you're feeling ashamed about who you are, the likelihood that you're going to be open and truthful about how you feel is not very likely, because you feel ashamed. You're afraid of the ridicule or judgment that you'll receive by saying how you really feel. So when you feel ashamed, you're likely to go along with what other people want for you to try and combat the shame you feel. Therefore, that means you're not going to be vulnerable. And if you can't be vulnerable, how can you be expected to be authentic or even creative? So this is why shame impacts us in so many ways, and it's so fundamental to get to the bottom of it. Because if we allow shame to run our lives and the fact we're ashamed, are we really going to speak our minds? Are we really going to live a life that we're going to be proud of, that's inherent to us? Or are we dominated and dictated by this emotion that feels awful, that we don't know what to do with? And the only way we can make sense of it in our lives is to blame ourselves and say, I am this person. This is exactly the purpose of what shame is. This is what shame is trying to do. And you can navigate your way through there by questioning each of those thoughts and feelings that you have. Trace it back to where they started. I don't believe that anyone is born naturally inadequate or unloving or unworthy. I believe we've learned that this is who we are based on feedback or comments we've had, and we've internalized it and we've identified with it. And because we've identified with it, we now completely identify with it. It's a part of us, so we don't see it as coming from outside. This is why this exercise is so tricky. And it's important to actually look back at the evidence and your life experience as to where these things started to come into play. It's when you look at your feelings of inadequacy versus what you do that actually makes you inadequate. You need to compare the evidence versus how you feel. And you'll probably notice that actually there's nothing I can really point to that justifies me having this feeling. So why am I having this feeling? The shame has actually made me work harder at work. I know I'm performing very well at work. I have a good relationship or a functional relationship, but yet I'm still feeling this feeling of shame. Like, why? Why am I feeling I'm just not good enough or inadequate when clearly other people think I'm doing a good job? So this is all down to you. This is no one else. This is down to what you believe in, what you've inherited, perhaps subconsciously, in order to make sense of the world at one point. But now it's time to look at that shame you've got, look at that feeling you've got, question it, and start to unravel it. Start to pick it apart. Realize that shame no longer serves you in your life. And ask, if you feel shameful, what purpose is it serving? How is it serving me? And if it's not, then you know that it's time to start to divert attention away from the shame you're feeling and invest it into other areas of your life that will help you in your own personal growth. A final note to end on is to take responsibility for your actions and own your actions. So if you do make a mistake, it's not because I'm just not capable of doing the right thing or I always make mistakes. You can allow yourself to make mistakes, but know that you can learn from them and grow from them. Because when you make a mistake or when you do something you don't want to do, that shame is going to be triggered. That shame is waiting there to be triggered and it's going to seep in. But it's the self-awareness that you've developed that's going to catch that as it seeps in and be like, no, the shame's coming in again and I don't want to repeat a negative pattern. I made a mistake. It's okay to make mistakes. I know that I'm capable of learning from it and improving for next time. And if you do it on a small enough scale, on a consistent enough basis, you will make the progress that you will want to, and you will then be taking away all that energy and attention from the shame. So the shame is not getting any more of your energy. And as a result, it starts to slowly fade away. It may always be there, but it's going to become less paramount in your life, and it's going to move towards the back of your mind, because now you've replaced it with a new mentality where you will own your actions, you'll be responsible. That includes making mistakes, and it includes learning from them, rather than making a mistake and assigning your whole identity as I'm a failure, because then you'll never grow from that. Comment below on what your experiences of shame are and how you've best navigated it. Please like and subscribe. There's going to be more content coming out soon.